Hi, my name is Alex Woody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Max Loves Midland show.
Welcome back to the Max Loves Midland show, and this is a really interesting week because this is episode 21, kind of a celebration. The show is old enough to drink now and go to the bar, so that's an interesting turn of events, and today is really exciting because we are going to space, and that has also never happened on this show. I mean, I guess I can't speak for the audience. I don't know what you guys are doing at home, but we've never been to space on the show, so we are extremely excited to talk about this, and leading us through this week is going to be Alex Woody, the communications manager at the Midland Center for the Arts. Thanks for coming with us today, Alex.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin.
Awesome. As always, I'm Kevin LeDuc. I'm your weekly tour guide, and we're going to have a little bit of fun today, and we're going to get to know Alex a little bit better, and we love telling local stories here in Midland, and there's not too many places more iconic than the Midland Center for the Arts, honestly.
Yeah, so we've been a community staple since the 60s. We've been around bringing community theater, symphony orchestra, presented programs, and Broadway and museum art to the greater Great Lakes Bay region.
Super cool. And when I was a kid, I grew up about 25, 30 minutes from here, and it was always awesome to have those full-scale field trips to the Midland Center for the Arts. You'd pack in the yellow bus, and you drive on over to Midland, and I think it was called the Hall of Ideas.
Yes, the Alden B. Dow Hall of Ideas.
Awesome. And it had this thing, it was hanging with this large rock, and I think it was about gravity, but really vivid memories of having fun in that space. And it's just so cool that place continues to be a space that is filled with people. And we're going to talk a little bit about it today, but some renovations going on that are going to drastically change that area as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, the center was impacted by the flooding in 2020. And since then, the center has been working with different agencies on actually renovating our space to bring a new museum of art and science to the greater community.
That's awesome. And it's not just great for Midland. And like I said, being from Beaverton, we would come over and utilize the center, but it is a regional asset. A space like that, it's very, very rare for a town like ours.
Absolutely. So for a community of this size to be able to have that scale of a museum, that's not something you're going to find anywhere. And with this renovation, it really gives us a chance to put Midland on the map in a new way in the state of Michigan.
Extremely, extremely exciting. And how long have you been with the center now?
So I've been with the center for 3.5 years. I was one of the first hires back from the pandemic.
Amazing. So you joined in a really interesting time, not only in our community,
Yep.
Recovering from this incredible flood that was just so destructive in so many different ways, but then also we're going through a worldwide pandemic at the time, and here you are moving to Midland, Michigan.
It was a very interesting time for sure. Of course, when I came back, we were still working a hybrid situation and just coming back to the office for the first time. But in a way, having all of that and coming in at the time of the recovery from the flood and coming back from the pandemic, that's what kind of instilled a love for me in this community, just because getting able to hear all of the stories and see the way that the community was able to come together to help one another out.
And you're not a native Midlander at all. So,
No, not at all.
And your journey's taken you in different ways to the state of Michigan. I know the state of Michigan's always been a part of your life, but you're originally from Kentucky, correct?
Yes, so I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, about 30 minutes north of Nashville on the Kentucky-Tennessee border. Theater was always a part of my life, so I'm part of an inner-abled family, so growing up being able to go to live events was always just such a rarity for me. And I knew when I went to my undergrad at Michigan State that was something I needed to find professionally. And I've been very blessed in my career that I've always been able to work in arts administration in some capacity.
So was most of your I guess you can say most of your experience attending shows while growing up or going to any sort of live event, would that take place in Nashville, or what would that mean for your family to be able to go experience that?
Yeah, I mean, Nashville is the art scene down there. Tennessee Performing Arts Center is a wonderful organization, and where I had my being able to see a tour for the first time. There have been so many lovely productions, but I grew up in an arts-loving family, so my parents, whenever we went to a new city, we would try to find a show or a concert or something going on just to kind of immerse ourselves in whatever the local culture might be.
It's incredible. As we go through our conversation today, I want you to remember all of those shows you've went to, because I might grill you at the end a little bit and
All
see
right.
exactly
Sounds
what
good.
some of your favorite shows have been. So what does your day-to-day look like at the center? And I'm sure it's probably looking a little bit different right now with a very specific exhibit there that we will talk about later, but what does some of your work look like?
So no 2 days in my job are the same. Working at Midland Center for the Arts, we have such an array of different programmings. So I could spend the morning working on a show like Dear Evan Hansen and spend my afternoon working on a show like Anne Frank, which is totally different because we're working with community actors. We actually have the full creative scale of being able to do, in a sense, whatever we want on a marketing side.
That's awesome. And just a complete side note, as I refer to the Midland Center for the Arts, do you like the center? Do you like Midland Center for the Arts? Like, how do you prefer it?
Midland Center for the Arts, just not MCFTA. That's the only
You guys were such a big inspiration for me because when I first got to the Community Foundation, everything was always written as MACF. And I took direct inspiration from the Midland Center in coming up with our new branding. And my number one thing was always no acronyms.
Yep.
No acronyms. No one knows what they mean. So
It's still used throughout the community, but just internally, we like to refer to ourselves as the center.
it's beautiful. And hopefully we can continue to turn those ears. Everyone out there, make sure you refer to it as the center or the Midland Center for the Arts. So what kind of programming are you guys offering at the center beyond the Infinite?
So Beyond the Infinite right now, we have summer camps that just went on sale Monday, adult art classes in different mediums. So we have ceramics, photography, drawing, paint, mixed media. And then we also have presented programs. So that's going to be our Midland Symphony Orchestra, our Center Stage Theater, which is our community theater, and then, of course, the Broadway Matrix and Windows on Our World series that have all the different artists brought from different parts of the world.
Center Stage Theater is so cool, too, because you can see some of your friends and neighbors just on full display and kind of their element. And a lot of people, it's just such a great outlet for them. And, not every community has a space for people to be able to take part in this type of art.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's one of the most enriching parts of my career is actually being able to work with Center Stage Theater, just because over my 3 years of being here, I've been able to watch so many different folks develop as performers and actors and also working behind the scenes. So being able to see that is just so fulfilling for my career, and it's what keeps me passionate about what I do.
And you've had a journey to get here. But when we talk about you working at the Midland Center for the Arts, this is not the first building you've worked in that is a space like the center. I mean, no two are exactly alike, but what was your first job in this industry?
So my first job was as an intern at Wharton Center for the Arts. I lived in the dorm that was right next door. So in my first week of my undergrad, I went in there and tried to find whatever ways I could to get involved, to try to find a career within this industry. And then from my undergraduate program, that took me out to Connecticut in Hartford Stage, where I worked for a season as a marketing apprentice. And then I went out to Denver Center for the Arts out in Colorado and worked through the pandemic.
So when you want to work in theater or when you want to work in production, did you always know you wanted to work in communications as well, or did this kind of align for you?
It kind of aligned for me in a weird way. So I grew up, I was always obsessed with theater in a side of what I couldn't see, because theater is such a temporary art. So when I was young, there's decades of, Sondheim musicals, and in the 50s when Showboat opened. So I would always just I would read Wikipedia pages for shows I would never be able to see a production of. And that just, when I was looking for a career, I was like, what can I do with all of this knowledge of theater? And communications was just such an easy strategy, just because it's what I'm most passionate about. It's what I'm easy to talk about. And being able to find that, what I love about what I do is that you get to bring people to the theater. So the advertisements that you see, I get to have a little hand in everything that the center does. And it's nice because, like I said earlier, no 2 days are the same.
And growing up, what did you want to be?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, growing up, it feels like every year it changed. When I was little, it was an astronaut. And then at one point I wanted to be a social worker or a computer engineer. So by the time I was in my undergrad program, I felt very confident that theater was where I was meant to be, just because it felt like such a natural fit.
That's awesome. So if things are going out from the center and people see communications from the center, is that coming from you traditionally?
Unless there's something wrong with it, and then it's someone else.
Fair enough. That's what I always say, too. It's like, well, I mean, if there's something on there, you can blame the intern. What intern? Don't worry about it.
Not our intern, not my marketing intern. She's wonderful.
So over time, how has programming changed at the center? Has it always had kind of this core piece where it's sitting at right now, or when it first opened, was it envisioned in a different way?
So the center has had many different iterations of their programming through the years. A lot of the presented programs that you see now actually started at what was once called the Matrix Festival. So right now we have a Matrix series that would be different types of performing arts events, but the initiation of that festival was actually, it happened in the summer over the course of maybe 1 or 2 weeks, and you could see dozens of different artists from across the world. And as the center has just evolved as a business and we've taken on this more performing arts model, we're able to bring these things throughout the year rather than just having our season dedicated to things that we produce in the community.
What's wonderful about the center, too, is when you're offering these wide array of programs, you're inviting everyone in from the community, coming from different spaces, different backgrounds, different interests. I've I mean, I've went to the Infinite at the center, but I've also seen like the Jay and Silent Bob podcast at the center. I've seen like the Detroit Tigers bus came to the center like 15 years ago with all the players on it, and just really bizarre but creative events that can't be held unless it's in a space like that. I've covered Santa School at the center.
Yeah.
It's just a really, really interesting place where a lot of things can come together, and you guys are really on the cutting edge of a lot of things that happen in our community in terms of accessibility. So I look at the last few years at the Midland area Santa House, we've been really invested in making sure that we are offering sensory-friendly experiences. And I know you yourself have a lot of passion in the DEIA space, which diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. But that accessibility piece is so important for our community. And I was just curious, how does that really come about for you guys, and why do you keep that at such a core of who you are as an organization and that value?
Well, I think when you have a performing arts center as an organization, there is a deep-seated need that you need to make sure that you are representing everyone in your community, and you have to be able to provide that access. It has to be diverse so that everything is equitable and anyone can have a seat at the table. So at the center, we do relaxed performances, and that offers anyone who might be on the autism spectrum, but also anyone who might have a light sensitivity or have something like PTSD. They could come and experience a performance that is just like any other performance, but it might have modifications. The lighting might not be as harsh, the sound might be turned down a degree or two, and that is just to provide a space for everyone to come. And I'm really proud that the center's been able to do that, and we're actually looking to grow those programs in the future.
And you're one of many organizations right now in this space kind of looking at ways to make our community more accessible. I mean, Go Great Lakes Bay is working on making sure that they are making tourism as accessible as possible, and they're doing inventories of facilities around the community. And us as Access to Community at the Midland Area Community Foundation, we've been really invested in a lot of projects that are providing access to spaces. The Grove Park Restroom Project was so big to bring that Changing Places restroom here to the community. And how does that make you feel as a community member, not necessarily as an employee of the center?
I'm really proud to see our community take action in this step. I mean, there's always going to be more work to do, and it's something that we constantly have to reevaluate and grow towards. But just being able to be in a community that cares, I think, is what matters most.
And I feel like it's really getting ahead of the curve, and in a weird ways, we're way behind it too, though. I don't mean
Absolutely.
that. I don't mean it like that. But in terms of this being a forefront conversation, I'm not sure if these conversations are occurring everywhere right now in the clip that they are happening in Midland. So I really appreciate the center taking a lead on a lot of that and just providing as inclusive programming as possible, because it's just great when folks can have access to community amenities and they feel seen and they feel heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do want to talk a little bit about the legacy of the center. And I know recently you had a 50th anniversary not too long ago, correct?
Yes, about 3 years ago.
Awesome. So 1 or 2 years older than the Midland Area Community Foundation.
Yep.
And we also did a 50 Stories campaign. And through our own self-discovery doing that campaign, it was just extremely interesting for me to meet people from the very early days of the foundation and just to understand how this was laid out. So now community members have this incredible organization to support. And it's the same way with the center. So do you want to talk a little bit about your storytelling campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started at the center, we were going through our 50th anniversary season. And for me, starting out at the center in a new community, at a new theater, that 50th campaign that we did was one of the most, I think for me, just to give me a love of this community, being able to hear from 50 different individuals in the community, some of which who were here when the center first opened, just about what it meant to them, what the center has provided through the decades. It gives you such a joy and a passion for what you do, and it makes me want to carry on that legacy for 50 more years.
And it's such a cheat code as a communicator to like learn on the fly in that manner as well.
Oh, yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's just a little bit of a gift. You get that information,
yes.
and then you could sit down at a podcast and be able to have those conversations. But a name that came up in our pre-interview, we talked about Nancy Barker, and she has a beautiful mid-century modern home in the neighborhood that
my absolute favorite house.
Yes, and she's amazing too, and like the art inside there is so incredible. And she really inspired a lot of what we do with the Maxwell's Midland Communicators Group, because when I first came to town as a communicator, we would have something called the Midland Area Marketing Partnership, and we always met with Nancy, and her outfits were just incredible, and her art was incredible, and it's just cool to see these community pillars still rally around the Center for the Arts.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Nancy Barker and her outfits. That's actually how I met her. So at the 50th gala, she was wearing this like fantastic sweater, and I had to say something to her. And she was immediately, she's like, this is what I wore on the first day, the day the center opened. So, just having these stories in our community is just, it's so unique. And I hope people realize that how rare this is to have this in a community.
Absolutely. And speaking of rare, a big thing we're going to be talking about today is something called the Infinite.
Yeah.
It's unlike anything I've ever experienced before. I thought that I'd seen it all when I've used Apple Vision Pro, but apparently not. This is a completely different way of interacting with virtual reality. I don't want to say artificial intelligence is not quite that, but just as a nerd, like computing at just this unbelievable scope. So how does an organization like the Midland Center for the Arts land something like the Infinite? And just real quick, what is the Infinite in your words?
So the Infinite is the largest immersive experience that happens in space. So it is 200 hours of footage that was shot on the ISS station by astronauts. And for the center to be able to bring on an exhibition of this size, truly this is the largest exhibition we've ever bring in scale, but also at the moment in popularity. We haven't had an exhibition of this size since dinosaurs. And this is an exhibition for ages 8 and up. So being able to attract a new audience for the center, in terms of how we were able to bring this exhibition to the center, it's a conversation of over, I think, 4 years. So they first scouted this back when we first came from the pandemic, being able to see it out in Toronto or Montreal when it first opened. And since then, it's just meeting with different agencies and groups to actually like try to figure out how this works in our space. Because we're only the 7th city that's had the Infinite in the US, but every city has had to adapt it to a different space within their venue. And of course, with ours being under construction, it brought in a lot of unique challenges in bringing it in.
So essentially what you do is it's an immersive, even when you get into the line, you start feeling this idea that, oh, I'm doing something different. And it's very well themed, and you feel like you're really a part of it, and you're seeing the photos of the astronauts, and you have stories. And I was very fortunate to be able to go twice now. And once you actually get into the exhibit itself, you put this headset on, and that's what you live in throughout the entire time. And then essentially, is it a grid that you're walking on, or?
Yeah, so the floor has these different, if you take your goggles off, you'd be able to see just these rows of green dots, and that's actually what's tracking you through the virtual ISS station that you're going to be able to see in your headset.
And then as you walk through there's these, so you're in kind of like this world that, I mean, you're in space technically, but everyone else that you see, because you don't want to run into people, you still see them as glowing objects. People within your party have a color, and people outside of your party have a specific color. But then there's orbs, like these glowing circles, and you walk up, and when you touch into it, it puts you directly into a 4K video, and it's really, really immersive. You're seeing exactly that footage that was filmed by those astronauts.
Yes, and it's actually walking you through what they do in a day. So you get to watch the astronauts have their break bread together. You get to watch them go out and repair something outside of the ship. It's really cool, and there's over 200 videos of footage in that. So no two experiences are the same. Every time you come, those orbs are going to be in different positions and offer you different experiences to see.
And yeah, so I went one day, and I went the very next day, and it felt like I would know what was coming, and it was something totally different. So the computers that run that, like, what type of scale are we talking about in terms of the technology that's in that space right now?
I mean, we have had to up our servers. That is a little bit above my head, but let me just say that is the actual the installation process for this was nothing like I've seen before at our venue. Just the amount of testing we had to do, the configurations that had to happen, it was nothing like I've seen before.
So when the center brings a show into town, obviously the show travels, it comes here, it gets on the stage, and they practice, and then the show occurs. Are there full-time staff here from the Infinite, like, on site at all times, or is it on y'all?
So we've actually had to hire a lot of staff to put this on. The Infinite has created over 40 jobs at the center.
It's amazing. So we've got all this economic development taking place. You have this intersection of community members coming together, and then you've got, an injection of a few more jobs.
Yeah.
And that's really, really cool. Now, something I think is awesome, and the first time that I heard about the center, it was in conjunction with it being talked about, or not the center, the Infinite. It was in conjunction being talked about with a lot of field trips that are coming in. And I think that's really cool to be able to offer that experience for kids locally. And obviously, the Hall of Ideas was always a place where kids would come and have those field trips. But now, this is a totally different type of experience.
Yeah, so we've been really lucky to book over 5,000 students from the Great Lakes Bay region to come through and see the Infinite. We do field trips on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays during the day. And just being able to see students in our building in this, of course, we've been doing matinees since the pandemic, since coming back from the pandemic, but we haven't had this activity in our museum. And just being able to see their faces coming out of the experience, there's nothing like it.
That's absolutely incredible. I couldn't imagine being, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, and walking out of that, and just the smiles on their faces, like the reactions have to be unbelievable. And even the adults coming out, I've seen people cry.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure. The stories you hear from people, we had an old couple who talked about how it felt like they were dancing in space. So you really just get, every generation has something that is touching to them about this experience.
Absolutely incredible. And people have a lot more time to go see it. So how long is it going to be there until?
So at the moment, we are on sale for April 6th.
Amazing. So now this is a little bit of a challenge. Now, when we're looking at art in this way, I feel like this is totally different than something you feel like you probably would have been working in or type of exhibit that you would have had at the center. How is this challenging art to be different?
I mean, a lot of people, when they think about arts and sciences, they think of them as a separate entity. But at the center, we always like to use the STEAM acronym just because it puts art within sciences, because all of these things coexist.
Amazing. So you can be in Midland, Michigan, but feel like you are in space. Super cool. So I want to talk a little bit more now about, we're going to come back to Earth. We're going to come back to Midland here. You moved to Midland. You've always had family in the state, though, correct?
Correct.
So where's your family actually from then?
My family's all from the Metro Detroit area, so my parents all grew up in Trenton.
Awesome. So what are some of your favorite things to do when you visit the Metro Detroit area?
I always like to go to the Fisher Theater if Broadway in Detroit has a show. The Fisher Theater is just one of my favorite venues in general. There's so much theater history in there. Hello Dolly had its first performance there. So there's just such a deep-seated theater history in Detroit, and also the state of Michigan. I've just loved being able, even when I grew up in Kentucky, Michigan was always like a second home to me and where we would see the best art.
How does our scene compare nationwide?
Compared to nationwide, I mean, Michigan is just such a unique state in that going to Kalamazoo or going to Grand Rapids, it doesn't necessarily feel like a trek like you do in other states. When I grew up in Kentucky, going to Nashville or going to Lexington, those were the only two options. But in Michigan, I can easily name 5 cities that I could go to on any given weekend, and there would be an exhibition I could go to. There is a concert going on. So art is alive in the state of Michigan.
And that's pretty incredible because I think that speaks to Midland as a location within our state as well. You live in an area where I always say that I can take, you're at the center, you just turn out onto Eastman Road, you just drive right up onto US 10 and just take 75 directly down. It's like 2 turns and you're in Detroit, basically. Yeah. And I think that's such a cool location value for our state. So if you do have the interest of exploring larger metropolitan areas, you can access them pretty quickly, whether that is Lansing, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Detroit, and the list kind of goes on. Or if you have that desire to head up north and you want to have that up north feel, Midland's kind of where the trees start, to call back on some past episodes. It's a really interesting space within the state.
Yeah.
So what are some of your other venues within the state that you really enjoy going to?
So I mentioned the Fisher Wharton Center. I mean, that's where I got my career start. I always
loved
loved
going
back there.
Yeah, that was cool.
Great. Wharton Center, out in Kalamazoo, there's the State Theater, there is the Miller Auditorium. I mean, we just have so many wonderful venues and of different, I always love looking at the architecture of a building, and there's so many theaters in our state that have just been built differently and have different types of theater, so.
And I think, too, that speaks to the aspiration of this state as it was continuing to develop, and you had different manufacturing jobs in different places and really took pride in aesthetic, and you see that definitely in our community as well.
Oh, absolutely, in Midland.
So compared to other spaces you've lived as well, when you come to Midland, like what was kind of your first reactions? You get here, you see the chemical plant off the highway, and you probably take a visit or two before you accept the job at the center. But what did it feel like, and how did you know?
So how did I know about
How did you know that this would be a place that you could really see yourself working in?
Honestly, honestly, I would say it was the community response to the flood and just being able to see all of those stories. That was honestly one of the first things I read when I was moving to the community, and being able to hear those stories and see all of the hard work that the community's doing to build back and help people out. It gave me a sense of neighborly love that I knew I was longing for and wherever I settled down.
That's awesome. And if you're not at work and you're outside of that, outside of those four walls, what are some of the places you like to explore here in town?
Here in town, I love going to the Grace A. Dow Library just across the street. Pizza Baker is one of my favorite restaurants. Love going to Pizza Baker.
My favorite.
Oh gosh, I could go.
No offense to anyone else listening, but it
no
is my
offense to
favorite.
anyone else, but it is my favorite too. Yeah.
What's cool about Pizza Baker, and we've talked about it on the show before, that when they first got their oven at that location, that was a Midland Young Professionals and MyPros crowdfund, and it was the first
nice.
crowdfund done by MyPros. So that's always been a cool space to just say, like, people wanted that in that area, and it was helped facilitated by young professionals, and they've continued to just carry on the legacy by making incredible food. It's dangerous right next to Three Bridges, though, and I can walk there, so it's I don't know. But I want to talk a little bit more about shows that you've seen as well. So a lot of times we do a draft here on the show, and I said I can't fake it, right? The audience is gonna understand that I'm not being authentic, but I wanted to give some shine to the arts a little bit more, because I think it'd be wrong to not continue to talk about some incredible productions that have came out over the years. And I want to hear from you. What are some of your favorite productions? Can you give me a top 5, or what does that look like for you?
This would if you ask me on any given day, it's going to change. So these are just the first 5 impactful performances that came to mind. I was lucky enough to see the original cast of Hamilton, on Broadway. Cynthia Erivo in the color, the full original cast.
Okay.
Cynthia Erivo in the color purple. I still think about that one on a day-to-day basis. The show Company, the recent Broadway revival with Patti LuPone. One of my first professional productions I ever saw that my parents didn't do good research on was Cabaret. So I always think about that show. And if you're familiar with the really popular revival of it and how dark and gritty it is, just imagine like a 5-year-old seeing that.
Oh my gosh. I am familiar with that. That's bizarre.
So, they knew Liza Minnelli, and they were like, it's Liza.
It's okay.
So, oh goodness, a 5th one. Sunday in the Park with George. I love Sondheim.
That's awesome. And like you mentioned Cynthia, but we talk about these huge productions that are occurring now, and they're kind of coming to the big screen now. What does that crossover feel like to you when you see that come into a movie theater?
I love it, just because growing up, you think about in the 40s, 50s, 60s, how much theater was part of the national conversation at the time. I mean, at any given point, you would turn on the TV and there could be Julie Andrews giving a performance. And we don't necessarily have that same love for theater that we do. So whenever you have a moment like Hamilton or Wicked, it feels like something that we used to have. And that's what I love. I love when I see theater part of the national conversation.
It's cool. And my girlfriend and I, we watched Wicked, and she's a huge fan of Wicked. She also saw Wicked when she was in New York. So it's really important to her as well. And then that led to other conversations. We watched Hamilton. I've seen In the Heights now. And it's just a really, really interesting art form. Even as someone who wouldn't necessarily consider themselves somebody that's into that style of art, it so much goes into it.
And it says so much about the time it was created too, because now you look at Hamilton, we're only 10 years from it, and you can see like what the world was like in 2016 and how that differs from how we talk today.
Absolutely. And it's just awesome to see that convergence when you see art coming to display, but also you understand that cameras are also involved. And a lot of that stuff is shot in one shot. If you're looking at like a camera moving back and people have to sing and come out, and there's just so much incredible work that goes into it. So I really appreciate you sharing some of your favorite shows with us. But beyond that, there's a question that we always ask at the end of every single show. And I just want to know some of your feelings about Midland. So whether that's a business or whether that's changes, whether that's resources, whatever it is, it's a really loaded question. But looking forward at the future of our community, what is something that you want for this place?
I want to see more diversity. I really, and I know we're getting there, and I know that there's so much passion behind that, but I'm really excited to just start seeing new faces in leadership. And that's just part of like time and development. But there are so many exciting things happening in our community right now, just on the development side, that I just know in 10 years, like we're going to be looking back on this time, just thinking like, wow, how did we do it?
Absolutely. And new faces in leadership are definitely something that can move this community forward, and it provides diversity of thought and just different input. And if we're really going to be a community for all, we have to have the input of all. That means people need to be at the table, and we have to have those conversations, and we have to be open and honest about it. So, well, Alex, I really appreciate you being here today. And if people want to learn more about the center, or learn more about Infinite or anything else, where can they get more information?
All information at midlandcenter.org.
It's not mcfta.org?
Not MC. I mean, it would still work, I think.
No, don't go there.
Don't use it. Don't use it.
If you go there, your computer gets a virus. Do never go to that website. So, and thank you so much for being with us, and we really appreciate it.
Having me.
And thank you all for being with us here today on our 21st anniversary, or 21st show, or 21st birthday, whatever you want to call it. We're really excited to have you with us every single week. The Max Loves Midland show, it's really grown in different ways, and to just have such an outpouring of support and being able to tell local stories, it means a lot to us. Head over to maxlovesmidland.com. There's been over 3,500 events posted there. That's opportunities for you to meet with other community members. I was looking on there yesterday at work, and I was sad I couldn't go. I even saw an event where it was like a cat film fest at Creative 360.
And it's so fun.
And
you
it was
have
like,
to do it.
and it's amazing, and it benefits people in different ways, and that's opportunity for people to go connect. So thank you all for being with us today, and we really appreciate it. Make sure you come back next week. And as we always say on the show, if you build a bridge and it doesn't work, build a tridge. Subscribe wherever you consume media. Max Loves Midland is your entertainment, resources, and collective improvement hub for Midland County. Plan your next adventure in Midland at maxlovesmidland.com.